very important that all the unborn children get to rap on this, you know. So you know, in a very similar way, for example, the military right now is examining how we can create brain-to-brain interfaces that allow soldiers to communicate silently with one another and function not just as a well-trained unit of coordinated men who've been locked together into a, you know, some form of hyper-disciplined cultural fascism, in the sense that fascism originally meant the fascia, the tissues, the anatomy binding a muscle together, and that the people of a fascist government operated as a single coordinated muscle. But that it actually takes it a step further and literally binds us together in that way. And that's, you know, that's the military application, but the angelic version of that, as posed by Jesuit paleontologist and philosopher and theologian Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he said, hyper-collectivism leads to hyper-individualism. And just as we saw with bacteria merging together into complex cells, it creates newer and more complex environments that create new niches, that create new opportunities for diversity and additional layers of complexity. Just as moving into cities, we suddenly created new guilds and new specialized responsibilities within the city. Suddenly we were able to diversify into different kinds of roles within this newer and more complex situation. That the emergence of the planetary self is performing a very similar function, and that even as we become more and more transparent to one another, we become more and more ourselves, more and more unique, more and more creative, original, expressive, more and more distinct, because suddenly we recognize that we're participating in a much larger community that, and it, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a planetary village to raise a cosmic Christ child. So, you know, this is absolutely a situation of all hands on deck. It's time to row together, because, but even as we row together, the whole thing is for everyone to row in their own freaky way. And, you know, so rather than resist this, again, I hope that we get into sort of a as we learn to participate in this new emergent intelligence that's really beyond the understanding of any one of us, then it's very much akin to I used to play in this psychedelic electronic outfit in Lawrence, Kansas, in the United States called Order of Chaos. And we would take acid and we would play our shows completely improvised. And it was my first experience of merging telepathically into an instrumental electronic jazz ensemble where it was very clear that all of us were the tips of the tentacles of some jellyfish or something, some invisible, in what the Hermetic traditions call an egregore, or a third. It's the intelligence that opens its eyes between two lovers when they arrive in a tantric state together. You know, it's the angelic notes that appear when a choir is singing and resonating with the building, and they're creating harmonics between the entire choir of people and the building that no one is singing. You know, and that's what we're doing with artificial intelligence, and those ghost notes are actually, as we become more and more intimately connected with our machines, are going to become more and more a part of us. You know, the records of all of our behavior online are currently and actively being pursued as the substrate for creating a kind of magic mirror, a digital avatar, a reflection of ourselves that can take an orbital view of the data of our lives and our behaviors and show us ourselves in a profound and initially probably kind of scary new way, a new way that was in many respects identical to the way that people were afraid of the mirror when we first invented the mirror, that the mirror was believed to have these sort of terrifying spiritual properties. You know, that a mirror could steal your soul, or that a vampire couldn't be seen in a mirror because it had no soul. And likewise with the camera, you know, that anything that renders the previously unconscious as the conscious, anything that shows ourselves to ourselves from a new way, and thus creates an object out of what was originally the subject, a new it out of what was I, is going to appear to us as the monstrous, you know. So, you know, a really good example of this would be Pokemon Go. All right, so here we have the blending of internet space and physical space, you know, which is just in its very, very early stages, but you know, we're very soon to be moving beyond the cell phone to augmented reality headsets and basically a gestural and natural language spoken interface with our computers. So no more keyboards, no more mice. You know, we're going to be talking to our machines, having conversations with them. And in fact, this is going to be encouraged by the economy, because what people want is something that feels cute and relatable. You know, they found that people are less afraid of riding in an automatically piloted car if that car has a name and a personality. You know, so you can talk to your car. It's very much, and we kind of see that that's always been the case. You know, that in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, that Dr. Frankenstein rejected his monster and refused it an identity, and that's what created its problem. You know, and in Jurassic Park, we refused, you know, John Hammond and International Genetics refused to acknowledge the animal reality of these creatures, their own non-human intelligence. It treated them as commercial products to be sold, and so that was where the evil crept in, where the chaos creeps into the situation, is by denying the subjectivity and the agency and the selfhood of the things that we've created. Whether or not they you know, have a conscious self is sort of beyond the point, you know, because we can no more say for sure that any other human being is conscious than we can say that a particular piece of software that speaks to you as if she was your dead wife is conscious. You know, these questions are one of the many philosophical quandaries that becomes moot in this new age. Questions of life and death become moot. But the point is that because this stuff is so terrifying to modern sensibilities, it has to appear to us in the form of digital pets and pocket monsters. And, you know, we want our technologies to be cute and friendly and relatable, in the same way that we domesticated the wolf and the wild cat, you know, and now cat and dog videos have totally taken over the internet. Surprise! You know, when we finally got Google to learn on its own what it thought the internet looked like based on a survey of uploaded images, based on a survey of all internet images, what it provided researchers without any programming or prompting was a picture of a kitty. That is the picture of our situation in more ways than one. One, because an essential quality of our future is that we're moving beyond an anthropocentric construction of intelligence. We're beginning to recognize, as was discussed in a recent episode of the Radiolab podcast, which I highly recommend, about the wood wide web, the sort of organic internet that exists between trees in a forest and the rhizomal network, the network of underground fungi that connect these trees and transport nutrients to one another in what looks very much like the CIA aborted experiment of a socialized fax machine-based internet in Chile in the 1970s. That's what a forest works like. And in fact, that's probably what the future of human society is going to work like. We're already seeing this. Kevin Kelly, the founding editor of Wired Magazine and Whole Earth Catalog, or Whole Earth Review, says in his latest book, The Inevitable, that one of the 12 trends shaping the future is sharing. And that as we share more and more with one another, as we become more and more transparent to one another, for example, who ever thought that we would share our medical records? And yet, it turns out that by doing so, we learn more about ourselves by being able to compare our medical histories with one another. And so less and less do we value privacy, because again, privacy is, as the last speakers discussed, privacy is a proximal goal. It's not a terminal goal. It's a means, it's not an end. The ultimate end is the health, the safety, the thriving of whatever self we identify with. So if it's more helpful to us for us to share what we once rendered as private, then we'll do that. If it turns out, for example, to give a kind of a mundane example, prostitutes give one another their cell phone numbers. They tell them where they're going to be so that they can't be exploited or harmed by their clients. And increasingly, I remember, who here remembers Google Latitude? Nobody, okay. So Google Latitude a few years ago was a social network where the only feature was that you could share your GPS coordinates with your friends. And at first I was like, oh, I'm never gonna do that. The hell, I'm not gonna put my position on the internet. But the fact of it is that it's already there, and that if your friends know where you are, you're actually better off than if they don't. And so increasingly, becoming more and more, again, also with politics, we're seeing this in the increased ability to identify campaign funding sources. And this is completely renovating the way, it's revolutionizing the way that we conduct politics, at least in the United States, because it's becoming an increasing issue that every politician has all of these corrupt campaign sources, and that they're actually more beholden to the corporate sponsors of their political campaigns than they are to their political constituency that elected them. So as we become more and more transparent to one another, we become more and more accountable to one another. And in that accountability, the accountability in some sense is the masculine structure that we see growing as the companion to the desire to share with one another as the sort of feminine urge for intimacy. And that as we lay wider and wider, like right now in my neighborhood in Austin, Texas, they are laying all of the Google fiber optic cables. And on one hand, this is sort of this kind of creepy, multinational corporate thing that's going on around us. But on another level, it is an economic response to the need that we all feel to be closer to one another, the need to heal the alienation of the modern self. And we're going to find that. And the joke is on us, because it turns out that by healing our alienation, we necessarily have to catapult ourselves into these transcendental, transpersonal spaces that resemble nothing more than the transcendental spaces of a tryptamine experience. That this is, as Timothy Leary said, the internet is to the 1990s and after what LSD was to the 1960s. That the internet is a psychedelic substance, or as Richard Doyle says, an ecodelic substance, because it transfigures our understanding of who we are by embedding us, by implicating us in this endless cosmic conspiracy in which all of us are playing a part as a single agency, as a single intelligence that is observing itself from as many perspectives as possible. So, let's see, we talked about selves who know that they are the still point at the intersection of colliding infinities. We talked about the Anthropocene and humanity as an activity of geology. Let's see. 709. I don't know. There's so much more to say about this, but really, like, I write about this stuff all the time. I speak about it all the time. I'm happy to like engage with all of you at length on a personal basis. So for now, I would just want to take some questions. And meanwhile, I'll pass this little yellow book around, and I'm taking spherical footage of this and of some of my other performances, like my show last night at Chill Out Gardens. I'll be sharing all that stuff. So if you'd like to see that stuff, please stay in touch with me, and we will. I will be sure to share my experience at Boom with you and all the interviews I've made and so forth. So if somebody could take this and hand this out while you're doing the mics, handing out questions, you want to just pass that? Does anyone have a comment or observation, or they want to harass me with violent criticism? Please do.
So if you look at the shamanism, it's a lot about. Can you hear?
Can you just hold it closer to your
mouth? Okay. Yeah. It's a lot about going on a meditation trip and connecting with nature in ways that we don't normally do in everyday life, through going into various states. Whereas this technological shamanism looks like sticking a wire in somewhere. And what I see in society is people are doing the second thing, right? They are all on the subway on their iPhones and so on, and not really the first thing. And if you were to ask one of the indigenous shamans what he thought about this kind of stuff we were doing here, I'm not sure he would call that shamanism. So it seems like two different things are occurring, and I wonder if the other possibility that you might be able to imagine is that there would be a cultural split between the techno shamans and the actual nature shamans.
There already has been a cultural split, and it wasn't between the indigenous pre-modern worldview and what now has emerged to revive that epistemological, that world horizon, that world construction within a new technological and cultural ecosystem. The split is something that occurs between every sort of historical age, and so right now, because of the fact that planetary human culture is actually a rich tapestry of cultures operating on different technological platforms and different cultural platforms, then one of the characteristics of the future that makes it intensely psychedelic is that it's a future in which, as Douglas Rushkoff says in his book Present Shock, everything is happening now. We see, our entire history recorded in the Facebook timeline. We see our future predicted with increasing accuracy by Google's algorithms, and we're recording more and more. And we're getting better at modeling complex dynamical systems such as the planetary climate. And so consequently, the now that we're living in is expanding. And we can see this, just 150 years ago, even the members of the Royal Society believed that the Earth was 6,000 years old, and now, we're living in a time horizon that stretches back 14 plus billion years, and we're getting better and better at being able to anticipate the consequences of an extremely complex technological and ecological situation now, several decades into the future, at least in its broadest strokes. And so, it's the case that one of the things that we can say about the future is not that it's just going to be one way, but that as a river runs all possible ways down a mountain, that the future will have, in some sense, and this is what I meant about hyper-collectivization leading to hyper-personalization, that the future will have more options for how to be a human being than before. It will have more ways for us to become partial and non-inclusive of the future than it did before. you know, and this is very well elegantly posed in Charles Stross's science fiction novel Glass House, where he suggests that after the singularity, when human beings have essentially achieved digital immortality by digitizing ourselves, that this leaves us vulnerable to the insecurity of knowing that we may have been hacked, that we may not be who we really think that we are. And so entire regions of this galactic society pull out and actually opt for mortality and for the limitations of a physical existence that ends in death, because then at least they know that they're somebody and that they haven't been, you know, suborned by the enemy, you know. And so, and in that sense, I think, you know, in a way, the ancestral human being was more complete than any of us are now. It's actually the case that the Cro-Magnon brain case was significantly larger than the modern human brain case. That we indeed lost something by outboarding our memory to the written word, and that we are losing something by outboarding our geospatial intelligence to turn-by-turn map instructions, you know, and our ability, in a few years, you know, our facial recognition ability to facial recognition software. I mean, who now remembers the phone numbers of the last 5 people that you met, you know? And how is that going to be any different in 30 years? Who now, you know, you're going to remember the names of the most significant people in your lives, and your extended cognitive, in, you know, this diffuse digital self that is paired with you is going to remember everybody else, you know, and so we are absolutely, in some weird sense, becoming more and more limited and more prosthetic, and there's a lot of people that are not going to opt into that, you know, and I agree with the gentleman at the Institute of Exponential Sciences before me, that I sincerely hope that it remains a voluntary thing, but we know that, you know, there's only a point beyond, you know, at which you can say that owning a phone is a voluntary thing, because it is so profoundly empowering to have a smartphone that the economic impetus, or rather just the psychological impetus, you know, the realization of this age-old desire to be able to interact more, you know, with these profound new capacities is being realized. And so people are going to want this stuff. People are going to move into it for the same reason that we're seeing this massive demographic shift out of rural areas and into cities. You know, but then we're also going to see over the next 50 years or so a massive demographic shift out of cities and into what we're going to call the planetary village. You know, these like individual small groups, you know, of, you know, a few hundred or a few thousand people that are connected to the rest of the world through high-speed internet, but are able to live in groups that more closely resemble the archaic human tribal organization. Because again, just like with Pokemon Go, as this angelic supermind, to use the Sri Aurobindo's term, the supermind that's descending into us, that as this process unfolds, that we're becoming more and more compatible with the machine, and the machine is becoming more and more compatible with us, in the same way that we domesticated corn, and corn domesticated us. You know, so we become more and more healthy for one another, and we're no longer hunched over our computers, tappity-tapping away, all crooked and Gollum-like at this little keyboard, but we're actually interacting with machines that are fluid and native and you know, harmonious with the human organism. So I hope it doesn't have to be an either-or thing, but a lot of people will treat it that way.